Just wanted to thank our volunteers, our staff, our patients, our stakeholders, our governors, our commissioners, experts by experience, the local government and the sister NHS organisations we work with. This is going to be an AGM, which is all about us giving our story of the year and looking forward, but it really involves a cast of hundreds, if not thousands, who won't be with us today. And I'm very grateful that our organisation sits within that sort of firmament of good people helping the services that we run. So without further ado, it's time for apologies. And I wonder, Michelle or Natalie, have we got apologies from anybody in particular to read out?
Yes, Jeremy, I've got some apologies. I've got Dr. Wisvanathan, Mandy Boffey, Joubert Ahmed, Alison Pugh and Peter Thorpe.
Thank you very much. And we go on to the little bit of formality, which is the minutes of the previous annual general meeting we held last year. There are 8 pages of minutes. You can tell that we've moved on and changed because there's a different chief executive in the attendance on page 1 last year, Mark Axel, before he moved off to the Integrated Care Board. First of all, can I just ask people, are there any questions on the accuracy for those people who were here last year? Are there any questions or concerns? If not, in that case, can I ask people to approve the minutes as a correct record? I don't hear any opposition to that, so thank you very much for that formality. And I think straight into the first item, which is a service used reflections video, and I think that will be introduced by Liz.
Hello, my name is Andrew Wright. I have been with Thrive Into Work since May this year. I'm currently at the stage of waiting to start my new role as a business administrative apprentice for the professional development team at the NHS Dudley Group Foundation Trust. I would definitely rate the Thrive Into Work service a 10. It's really helped me getting back into work ever since I started with getting support with Thrive Into Work. I have gone to lots of, I've done lots of interviews. I've been invited to go further in the application process. And it's just by the help that I have received from my vocational specialist as to the information that I put down on the CV. We worked together and worded things perfectly. And yes, I'd like to say a big thank you to my vocational specialist. She's been a really great help, and I'm glad I've got her for another 4 months when I start. But yes, I would definitely recommend this service to anybody who's struggling to find work because of any difficulties they're experiencing in life, like in disabilities or mental health problems. And yes, that's my my feedback video for the Thrive Into Work service. Thank you.
Recovery College has given me back hope, meaning and purpose into my life. My success is that after 8 years unemployed due to my mental health, Recovery College has helped support me as a student and a volunteer, and now I'm employed full-time as a paid staff facilitator.
Hello, my name is Akiko Rahman. I'm 49 years of age. Chelsea Ellis has been supporting me find a job. She's been more than just helping me find a job. She's mentally helped me. She's created a CV for me. She's been looking for jobs online. Currently, she applied for job as well. Currently, I've been offered a job with DX Group. Chelsea Ellis has always been punctual and professional, and she goes extra mile to help, even if this is not part of her job role. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Agnes Walworth. I'd like to thank the Black Country Mental Health Trust, especially 2 members of staff, my CPN Haley and Neil, and my support worker Anne-Marie Backhouse. With their support, I've managed to remain in the community without admission since 2019. Prior to that, I spent quite a lot of time in hospital, so I would just like to say thanks.
Thank you very much, Liz, for putting up the show. And our first stop in our story of the year is to go straight to Marsha Foster, who's the current Chief Executive of the Trust. And over to you, Marsha.
Afternoon, everybody. Can I just check you can hear me okay? Because we've been having a bit of micro, and I've got a thumbs up from Dean, so that's fabulous. Thank you so much for joining us all this afternoon. You might notice that we haven't done as much communication about our AGM this year as we might normally have done, largely due to the mourning period that we were in following the Queen's death. So apologies for that, but we are absolutely up and running and delighted to have you here with us today. You'll be glad to know I'm not going to be talking for very long at all, but start off with introducing a quick video clip of our year in pictures, really, because it's always a lot better to look at these things visually than for me to talk. So let's have a look at the vid and I'll be back with you in just a sec. Thanks, Liz. Thank you so much for that, Liz. Great to see that. There's some things I'd even forgotten about, to be honest, on there. There's no better way to get a good flavour of what we've been doing during the year. I'm just going to, my job is easy for the time being. It's just to do a couple of slides on what some of our key events were really, but I'm not sure we can quite give it justice to the same degree as that film. We've had some new team members, or some definitely moving around of team members this year, myself included. You'll be aware that our previous Chief Exec, Mark Axel, has been appointed as Chief Executive of Black Country Integrated Care Board, firstly on secondment and then latterly substantively. So I've been in the role of Interim Chief Exec since the very end of last year. Also delighted that Lydia Jones has joined us as Director of Therapies, and she's here this afternoon, as is Laura McGowan, who took up her role as Chief Clinical Information Officer during the year as well. So it's been great to see the impact that both of those colleagues have had on our team. And we've also welcomed two non-executive directors as well to the team, Dr. Janet Bailey and Roger Dunshea. So it's been great to have them around our board table. The next slide is really just some of our really key updates. I mean, we have really, this was the bullet point that we hoped we wouldn't be talking about again, I think, when we got together last year. But those of you that are involved in health and care delivery, and even everyone else for that matter, will very much know that COVID-19 has remained with us throughout the year and remains with us still. And we've continued a really flexible and energetic and innovative response really to COVID, but with a focus very much more on restoration of services. And we know we've got some huge challenges there. We recognise that we have issues, for example, with waiting times for some of our services, and also that I think we're still in the foothills of discovery really about the longer term impact, I guess, that COVID and the lockdown has had on people's psychological well-being and the way that we're all feeling. And I think that's just something that we're starting to get our head around now, but we can talk about that certainly later on in the meeting. After lots of development and consultation work, we've launched some really key strategies that we're going to be talking a bit more about today as well. Not least our clinical strategy, people strategy, comms and engagement, digital strategy. There was also our service user and care involvement strategy that Dean's going to talk about shortly as well. You'll know that we've been focusing hugely on our transformation plans. It's a very short sentence that really sums up a huge amount of work, and thank you to everybody in the team and everybody who's been involved in the consultation for that. There has almost been no area that we haven't explored this year. And we know that's really critical for our success forward, and was indeed very much a driver, wasn't it, of our merger 2 years ago about improving clinical services across the Black Country. We've also got a growing role in the system as well, which Cully will talk a little bit more about later on in the meeting. We've been preparing for becoming lead provider, and then we actually became lead provider with effect from the 1st of July. So we'll be talking a little bit more about the opportunities that presents us later on in the meeting as well. And as if we could forget it, we welcome the CQC, who did a full inspection on us in November and January. Feels like a long time ago now, but actually now I'm thinking about it, it was very quite a challenging period, as Omicron was also visiting us at the same time. So it was quite a challenging period, and a huge thank you to all of our staff and colleagues and partners who helped us achieve that good rating. We've maintained our anti-racist organisational pledge and done a huge amount of work towards that, which Ashley will be talking about in just a short while. And definitely last but not least, the Eradicating Dormitory Wards, which is the very formal name for the great bits of news that have reached us around getting some proper, serious investment into our older people's inpatient areas, which has been very, very long awaited, certainly not without its challenges, and we can certainly talk a little bit more about that later on, perhaps in the Q&A session. But finally at last, we're going to get some much better inpatient accommodation for older adults in Sandwell and in Walsall. So a really quick update, and I'm very happy to hand over to Dean, our Chief Nursing Officer, who's going to be talking about some quality highlights for the year. Over to you, Dean.
That's great. Thank you very much, Marsha, and it's wonderful to be here. Just before I start on giving some of the broader detail, I get the pleasure to provide the highlights, but this is a real partnership element of the organisation, and it's a huge thanks from me to Lydia, Laura, Mark Weaver and Chris. I couldn't wish for a better group of colleagues to work with on quality improvement. So thanks so much for all the support you've given me and the team over the last year. But just to start with some of the nursing team highlights, to echo your points, Marsha, around IPC, what an amazing team and what a challenging year. So Claire and the team have really strengthened our internal approach to IPC and all infection control management. But what isn't always acknowledged is how we contribute to the wider system around IPC. And I can honestly say it's been super challenging, but the level of assurance that we've been able to provide has been superb. So that's a big thanks to the team around how that looks. For me, as a nurse and as a nurse director, it's been tremendous to see the improvements that we're making around nurse leadership in the organisation. It's already great to see our new leadership team taking shape. I'm hugely proud of that and can't wait to start working more formally from the first week in October. But what's superb for us now is that colleagues will be able to join our organisation, and we will really be able to help them map out their nursing career within our trust and further afield within the Black Country. I'd also just briefly like to touch on our approach to violence reduction. We do know within our organisation, as all mental health and learning disability organisations, reduction of violence across our services is a key priority, and it's been one of our key quality priorities during the last 2 years, actually. And thanks to the Quality and Safety Group for sponsoring a large amount of this work. We're also trying to use technology and test technology in supporting our teams and service users when violence is experienced. So we are working on our body-worn camera pilot and more to come on how that looks. Next slide, please. So safeguarding, a core a deliverable for us as an organisation, and Natalie and the team have been working very hard on ensuring that our internal safeguarding procedures are up to speed, and also our safeguarding training is very much in place to support divisional and frontline teams. And I have to say, we've also been put through our paces as a board by Natalie around safeguarding, which has been great to see in the last year. The ICB structures, which we'll hear more about, are really redeveloping the safeguarding structures for the Black Country, and we've been fully involved in how that's taking shape. So again, huge thanks to how that looks. And hopefully, certainly our internal teams are benefiting from the short bulletins and briefings that we're putting together, certainly around domestic homicide reviews and safeguarding adult reviews. And again, any suggestions from colleagues around more safeguarding materials that they'd like to access, then very happy to deal with that offline. Next slide, please. Yes, so Marsha has mentioned the Cqc inspection we were subject to. And as we all know, this took place during a really challenging time from a COVID perspective, but we received a really strong outcome, both on the main inspection, but also our well-led inspection. Obviously, there are areas of improvement that we've been working on since we received the report in May. Some of those elements are around our environment, but also around how we're approaching some of our workforce improvements, certainly some of our risk improvements as well. So we have an active CQC framework in place for continuous improvement. And I think we should acknowledge the tremendous work that's taken place around our environment, around ligature harm, minimisation and reduction. That's been a significant piece of ongoing work and has led to real capital investment being identified moving forward. So it's a big thanks from me again to Neil and the team and all the divisions for delivering on that. Thank you. Next slide, please. Nagina and the team have been super busy on our mental health legislation approaches, and thanks to the mental health legislation team led by Janet. Thank you very much. We're obviously preparing for how the new Mental Health Act will be kind of guiding services over coming years. So we're heavily involved in how that looks. nationally, but we've also been taking really proactive steps to look and support how people from all different backgrounds are subject to the Act. So we will have some local research taking place over the next year around how that looks for us as an organisation. And I think we'll be able to influence broader systems around how that looks. We're subject to regular CQC inspection from a Mental Health Act legislation perspective. And again, we've maintained very, very positive outcomes alongside those unannounced inspections. So it's a huge well done to our frontline teams. Thank you. Next slide, please. Service user experience and involvement and engagement. It's brilliant that we've been able to, as a board, sponsor a co-produced service user and carer strategy, which went live earlier in the year, which has now led us to a position where we've got a real structure on supporting and ensuring quality inputs from service users and their carers. And we're also working with Care Opinion on how we ensure that we get feedback really quickly into our services around how people from all our communities are experiencing how we provide services within the Black Country. So this is one area where we will continue to add great pace and great connections over the coming year. But again, more than happy to provide any further updates offline on that. But the board is actively supporting how we're moving forward within this crucial domain. Next slide, please. Health and safety. As you can imagine, a really big year for us, not just linked to COVID, but how we've been running services in new and innovative ways during COVID. We made a brilliant appointment in Fraser McDonald as our new head of health and safety, and Fraser's already had a huge impact internally and linking across into key partnerships with the police and other health and safety considerations. So this has been an area where we've needed to offer some rapid improvement and development internally. So it's pleasing to see that we're on that journey now, and more to come over the coming year. Next slide, please. Patient safety. This is a core deliverable for us as an organisation. As you know, we've been incredibly busy, not just responding to COVID from a patient safety perspective, but ensuring that we keep on track with all the serious incident investigations that are required within a mental health and learning disability trust. And also we've moved forward with utilising Ulysses as our new incident framework, which has been a big piece of work rolling that out, but we're already starting to see the benefits of how that looks. And again, huge thanks to Mark Weaver and his team, and Chris's team as well, for supporting the improvements around hitting the targets around our investigatory work. Next slide, please. And quality improvement, it's been phenomenal that we've been able to launch our quality improvement methodology around Cqc, and there's been significant improvement in how our learning lessons approach has taken shape with Eric and the team. We really have provided, I think, another level of input around learning lessons. And we've had some real challenges as a new organisation on ensuring that our policies are fit for purpose. So a tremendous amount of work on clinical policies being updated, and certainly the clinical workshops that are recommencing again to go through the next tranche of 50 policies will be happening in October. But this is one area which we really, really need to show continued commitment. Quality compliance is vital, but quality improvement is where we need to be to ensure that we're continually offering service users, carers and our staff the opportunity to receive services, but to work in a phenomenally supportive environment. Thank you very much. I will hand to Chris at this point.
Hi, welcome. I'm just going to talk through some of the developments that have happened with each of the divisions, of which we have 3: older adults, adult mental health, and then finally LD, CAMS and children's. I think it's really important to mention it's been a challenging year, and I think every year I come to the AGM, I say it's been a challenging year, and no doubt in the future I'll be saying it's been a challenging year, but no doubt over the last sort of 12 months we've dealt with a lot in operations, and I have to thank both our medical teams, Mark Weaver, Dean, your team, and also our corporate colleagues as well in managing the last 12 months. Just to remind ourselves, we've had COVID, which has been around for 2 years, very challenging, at times very grinding. I do think we're coming out of that now. I say that with a bated breath because we've got winter to come, but we seem to have turned the corner with that. We had a major incident happened to us at Penn Hospital. We had a Legionnaires breakout. Again, I have to thank the MDT working medically, nursing, operationally, and again, I make a big shout for our corporate services in managing that incident, which I think we did really, really well. Then we had monkeypox arrive with us. Although that didn't escalate to what we thought it might do, a lot of work went on to prepare our wards or our services if we had a patient with monkeypox. I still think as an organisation, we're still quite embryonic. We've still only been 3 years together as an organisation. And I think one thing about COVID, it did throw us all together and develop relationships with teams very quickly. But I think there's more work to do around harmonisation to make sure all our teams are working consistently. We had the Cqc outcome. And again, I thank everybody for helping us get a good, including our corporate colleagues, and as I said, our medical, nursing and operational. We have to adapt to new ways of working very quickly. We have to get the balance right with that. And I think now we're at a point making sure we do get that balance right with videos or face-to-face consultations. But the pressures don't go away because we've got obviously unprecedented demand in the NHS, particularly in mental health. And I've certainly seen a rise in that in terms of impact of COVID. We've now got the cost of living crisis, etc. We're about to enter winter. So in view of all of that, I'm really going to be really proud to talk through some of the developments that have happened over the last 12 months. So I'll move on to my next slide, which is older adults. And this division is led by Deb Cooper, Dr. Khalid, and Mani Gandaraj. And I must give compliments to Vanessa Wright, who left us recently. So some developments. We're providing in-reach to care homes model, which has been developed and implemented Pan Trust. So what does that mean in actual fact? So you look at our CMH teams, we've allowed our workers that now visit support elderly people in placements, which is really key in preventing breakdowns, working with GPs, working with the homes, developing care plans, doing early intervention to stop people from coming into hospital, particularly our secondary care services, and particularly our A&E environments. Also developed an older adult therapy service. That's a new model. Again, we've implemented that Pan Trust. Okay, what does that actually mean? We now have trust-wide service for therapies delivered mainly within the community settings. And again, that's delivering care closer to home environments, reduce stigma and support their recovery. We've employed Aboriginal nurses across the organisation, really key Aboriginal nurses. They're specialist nurses who work with dementia patients, and their impact is going to be quite significant. We also brought back the Dudley Memory Assessment Service that was delivered by a different organisation. We brought them back into our patch, the Black Country. That now enables us to have a model of care that's consistent, reduces unwarranted variation. And the big one for older adults, and is a big significant project, is eradicating dormitories, which you'll probably hear about a lot today. Really important development and really deserving of our elderly people are really supported and cared for in the right environments. And already work on the DPH site has commenced, and we're in the middle of kind of redesigning the older adult ward at Edward Street. So some big developments there, and I said I must thank the leaders of that division for the work they've done to date. Moving on to the next slide. Adult and specialists, quite a lot here, so I won't go through every single point. But the expansion of the trust benefit management team has been a real key for us, really, and that helps manage demand, the flow, and the pressures, which I have to say is very, very constant. And one of the reasons we're doing really well in not placing people out of area is because this team play a key role in that. Again, along with our medical colleagues, our nursing colleagues, and our corporate colleagues. But we expanded that team, and I think the impact of that has been felt. Maternal mental health services that went live in February 2022. Again, what does that mean? It's really, really key. We now have a service that supports the long-term plan that combines maternity, reproductive health and psychological therapy for women experiencing complex mental health issues arising from their maternity experience. So really key development. We've now got high intensity workers aligned to our mental health liaison services. We had them based in Wolverhampton. They work with frequent flyers who attend ED all the time, and their role has been quite successful, and we're planning to roll that out across all the 4 ED departments across the organisation. Recovery College, really, really good. We rolled that out across 4 localities, help patients not just with their mental health issues, but with their life pathway going forward. I won't mention them all, just moving on, but go down to the next slide. Liaison and Diversion, really, really key. Development of perinatal services as well, which is really key. Again, now we have across the Black Country an equitable service that has an MD approach for women with mental health problems, whether planning a pregnancy or are pregnant or have a child up to 1 year of age. And the final 2 points, liaison and diversion services, really key, and we're working with other partners across the patch to support people with their psychosocial interventions as part of the sentencing options, not always prison. So some big developments in adult and specialist mental health. Next slide. So learning disabilities, again, so lots of developments here. We've had crash pad development, which is a house basically that enables us. We have some adults who go into crisis, and instead of always placing them in a tier 4 bed or ending up in an ED, we have a crash pad development, and it's for 16 to 24-year-olds, and it helps support them in the community rather than going into that journey of a tier 4 admission. And that has been quite powerful, and we've actually stopped people going down that tier 4 pathway. We've worked with other organisations, hospital avoidance schemes, empowering you. Again, working with partners is really key going forward, and we've actually stopped people from going into hospital. Those 2 developments have really impacted on our TC performance throughout the whole year, which we're doing really well on. At one point, a number of years ago, 2-3 years ago, we were bottom of the table, if I can say that, the league table. We're above the national average, and we've reduced our inpatient population of LD and autistic patients not being stuck in hospital for unprecedented lengths of time. In fact, we're hitting our trajectory on that, so that's been a really good story to tell. IST developments for CAMS, intensive care support teams, again, supporting that ethos of stopping people going to hospital, really key. And then finally, the National Key Worker Pilot is now embedded within all our divisions, which is really key. That our vulnerable patients have key workers and peer support throughout their journey. Okay, next slide. CAMS now, and moving on, age range now is standard across the patch because we have differences between the former organisations. Moving on, we have an outreach pathway to ED patients, which is a really key development going forward. That enables us to provide consultation support and supervision and training to primary care to manage the physical health needs of people with eating disorders. So that's a really key development. And then a borough-wide CAMS medical rota in place, which may surprise people, but this is really a key development now because in some of Wolverhampton, CAMS consultants work within hours and out of hours, and you've got that specialist advice support. And Dudley and Walsall, they didn't have a CAMS specialist out of hours for our young people. We've now developed that and changed that, and that's now in place, which makes a difference, help improve the outcomes of that. COIPF very quickly, family nurse partnerships, services now providing dad pads, and I call them that, which is a national rollout to engage dads in positive parenting, backed by extensive research, which is a good development. We've recruited some transformational leads to help develop the health service going forward. And also we've recruited some band 5s with just recruitment challenges and shortages. And then my last slide, really, just a couple of points, working with Dudley partners in developing the wider Dudley children's model, which is really key. And then the final point, working with the local authority to develop family hubs, which is key. When I talk about family hubs, it means around in Dudley, being one of the local authorities, they've been awarded funding for 3 years for extra resource, and that will enable us more integration and working collaboratively in developing what the universal offer. So lots have happened throughout the year, really, and it's really one thing about the AGM, it lets you write things down to remind you what you've done. And it's quite cathartic when you write it down and you see the amount of work that's happened despite the context and the challenges. And this has happened because of good leadership amongst the divisions. Again, I commend them, the medical leadership, the nursing leadership, and the operational leadership, and our corporate colleagues helped us take this forward. So I just want to say I'm really proud of the teams and well done to them. I'll now hand over to Ashley Williams.
Thanks, Chris. And I guess just to add on to that, I've got the privilege today of talking about our people, so our staff and colleagues, and none of this is possible without them. So a massive thank you to all of our staff that work with us, and I absolutely include our bank and temporary staff within that. So if we move on to the first slide, so I'm going to canter through my slides quite quickly because I've got a lovely video that I want to show, which I think does a better job of summing it up than myself. But one of the key achievements, as Marsha mentioned, was around the development of our people strategy, really to underpin all of the great work that Dean and Chris have talked about. And this really is how we support our staff over the challenges over the next 2 to 3 years. And our people strategy has 5 core priorities. So how do we develop our staff? How do we support our managers and leaders in their leadership development? How do we care for our staff after the significant and challenging 2 years that we've had with not only the merger, but obviously pandemic and other world events that obviously affect all of our staff? And how we enable our people, give them the skills and help them to feel supported and belong to our workforce. And then how we recruit and retain our staff. So our people strategy is comprised of those priorities. If we go through to the next slide, there's just a bit more detail that comes from the people strategy. So we've also developed our equality, diversity and inclusion strategy because it was such a focus and is such a focus for us to ensure that we do have an inclusive, open, transparent organisation where people feel they can be their organic and true selves at work. So we made a commitment to becoming an anti-racist organisation, and I'm really pleased that the Governance Forum awarded us the Race Code accreditation, and we converted that into our anti-racist action plan, which you can see, and it is available for the public, as a commitment to not only becoming anti-racist, but actually how we're actually going to develop this. We also have supported and really grown the work we do with our communities and patients and service users. And certainly the community engagement team have grown. We've invested in a community inclusion team led by Cully. So there really has been a focus not just on our staff, but also the wider agenda when it comes to equality, diversity. We did work with, again, our staff and the public around kind of terminology and language we want to use, particularly when we're describing people from Black, Asian or ethnic minority groups. And came to some quite significant conclusions around that. And as a result, even our staff network decided to change their name. So they're now known as the Equality Network for Racial Inclusion, Equality and Cultural Heritage. So we've taken a lot of strides with our work we're doing around EDI, and in fact leading some of the work we do within the ICS as well, and supporting the ICS at the development of its EDI strategy, which is great to see. And the next slide is the work we've been doing to support our staff with their well-being. And again, it's been such a challenging year, and COVID certainly hadn't gone away. And we've really tried to support people, not only with their physical health, their mental health, and now more recently with their financial well-being, given the impact of cost of living increases. So you can just see on this slide just some examples of the work we've been doing to support people. And again, I won't go through in detail, but you can see there the work we do to support people through our staff support services. Really, really pleased that as a trust we have signed up to the menopause pledge. And in recognition of the majority of our workforce are women. And so how do we support our women that inevitably will go through either the menopause or perimenopause, but also our managers who need to support their staff and colleagues who live, work with women. So really pleased that's something we're taking forward and recognising. The next slide, please, is around the staff survey results. So quite timely, we're about to enter the staff survey for 2022. So hopefully you all know it's an annual survey we do. And this is quite a busy slide, but it's just to show really, not only do we look at our results from a whole trust perspective, but we drill down to make sure we understand the results across divisions and across teams, and work with those teams and staff to then say, well, what are the priorities for your specific area? What do we need to improve on? So we do it at a trust level, at a service level, and then we also benchmark ourselves against sector comparison, so other mental health and learning disability trusts. So we've got a clear understanding of what we need to focus on for the coming years. The next slide just shows, as a trust, what we are focusing on. So 4 key priorities, which are trust-wide. Again, we're continuing the work we're doing around improving equality, diversity and inclusion. A key focus for us, which is around creating a safe environment, and very much linked to the work Dean's talking around our quality priorities, but how we support our staff. The staff survey results told us that staff really do see an impact from patients, service users, and sometimes other staff, which affects them, whether that's an aggressive incident, violence, racial discrimination. So that's one of our core priorities. Supporting health and wellbeing, as you would expect, continues to be our priority. And then also that relationship between individuals, teams and their managers to work together and get involved in decisions. So that's the 4th priority. And as you can see then, each service line and team also has their own priorities and the work that they want to focus on with their staff that are bespoke to them. And then the next slide, oh sorry, this is the video I want to show, which is just around the work we are doing to support people in terms of the cultural development for the trust, and actually really recognising it's been really tough for our staff over the last 2 years, but we absolutely still want to make sure their own personal development is prioritised. So it just showcases some of the work we've done. So if we could play the video, Liz, that would be great. Thanks for that, Liz. So I think our final slide is just some of the highlights I wanted to pick out. So hopefully you'll see that in a moment. Yeah, so as I talked about, some of the development work we're doing, particularly as part of our anti-racist action plan and supporting the development of our leaders. We've signed up to the Menopause Pledge. And we're also improving our systems to enable and support our managers and staff. So a single expenses system, launching our e-planning system for our medical staff. We focused certainly the early part of this year and continuing for this year around supporting people's financial well-being. And then crucially for us is how we make sure we are recruiting and retaining our staff, and that investment in our temporary staffing team. So that's all from me. I'm going to hand over to Georgina.
Thanks, Ashi. So I'm just going to talk you through a little bit about our finances in 21-22. And 21-22, from a financial perspective, continued to be quite different. And that was because COVID-19, as we've heard about, didn't go away. I think so from a finance perspective, it was about how do we support organisations to get through that. So we continued with no contracts in place, so very much about how do we all work together across the system, and also that there was some additional funding made available to recognise the additional costs of caring for people during COVID, although it was quite significantly less than we'd seen the year before. I think probably one of the biggest things that we've seen over that period, both starting in 2021 and into 21-22 and continuing, is the focus on the system when it comes to allocations, revenue or capital. So we now receive, in effect, funding for the system, and then we work together to understand the best way to share that, to make sure that we're able to deliver all of the services. So that's our trust, as well as all of our acute colleagues and what was the CCG, now the ICB. Very different way of working, but actually really makes you think about where the money's going and how it's being spent. I think we've been really fortunate throughout the COVID period that they haven't stopped that investment in mental health. So the guarantee that investment in mental health will increase each year has continued, along with quite a significant amount of additional development funding that came through linked to the long-term plan. So it was really positive that was ring-fenced despite all the challenges around COVID. And for us in particular, in 21-22, we saw the first tranche of money linked to our community transformation, which was quite significant. So moving on to the next slide, please. So this just summarises our financial performance in 21-22. You can see that overall, we had a positive position at the year end with a small surplus. That reflects the system position. So across the system, there was a surplus in every organisation, I believe. And as we go now into the new year, things are without doubt a little bit more tricky than they were last year. I think if you look at our numbers, you can see both on the income and the pay that there's been significant increases in our income and in our pay expenditure, which, as I say, links through to that additional investment in mental health services, which is all good. But without doubt, we've had, alongside that, we've had real challenges in terms of recruitment and being able to recruit the staff to deliver those new services. So you can see within that chart that our agency expenditure, for example, has gone up. Moving on to the next slide, please. And it's just to show really in perhaps an easier to understand where do we spend our money on. So our pay is around about 80% of all of our costs, so a massive proportion. That's very similar to previous years, and the split on this chart here again is very similar to previous years. Just to point out that non-clinical covers a whole range of different people within that. It's not just managers or corporate people that sometimes people think about, but also includes a whole sort of army of admin people who are there to support the services, our housekeeping staff, our catering staff, our estates, all those people without whom we could not deliver our services. Moving on to the next slide, this is just a bit of a breakdown of where we spend our money in terms of non-pay, so that other sort of 20%. And probably the things to pull out here really is the huge cost of our estate linked to that. So if you add together the premises and operating leases with the depreciation amortization, and there's a bit of establishment in there, that really is the costs of our buildings and running the estate. We've got nearly 60 different properties we operate from across the Black Country, which is obviously important to be in our communities, but there is a cost associated with that, and which you can see coming through there. Next slide, please. Several people have already mentioned about capital investment this year, and we have been really fortunate to secure additional funding. And actually it's about 49.3 million in total for the two schemes. That's at Edward Street and Dorothy Patterson, which is huge, probably the most that the two legacy organisations and certainly our new organisation has seen. Much needed. Can't underestimate the amount of work that goes on behind the scenes to get to the point where you can actually put a spade in the ground and start the work. Huge amounts of design and input, engagement with the community, engagement with staff, as well as jumping through all the approval hoops that we have to go through. And so I do have to say there a really big thank you to the estates and capital teams, and particularly the older adults divisional team, who've helped and supported on that, on top of their very busy day jobs. In 21-22, we also put a significant investment into IT that you can see on there. We know we need to invest in our IT, so this is part of that continued commitment to that. Last year, you'll recall that we started to bring our services together in terms of an IT perspective, so that was ending the terra firma contract and bringing everything in-house. Which is why we needed that significant investment. And again, I think it's worth just saying thank you to the IT team, because that was such an achievement to transfer over so many staff in a fairly short time frame. But the benefits we can now take from all being on one system, we will see as the time goes on. I think the one thing to say around our capital investment, you can see we didn't spend as much as we planned, and that's partly because of COVID, and so we weren't always able to get on towards to have the work done because of COVID outbreaks, etc. But also what we've started to see in the last financial year, which has continued, is a massive volatility in the construction market, and this is leading to increased costs, but also real difficulties in obtaining goods and materials, whether it be doors, windows, bricks, etc. All of those things are much more difficult, take much longer. So that's all of those things have contributed to that, to the delay. But we are progressing those schemes in 22-23. Next slide, please. So looking forward into this financial year as we're in now, the allocations are still being done at a system level, and we now every organisation has a statutory duty to break even and contribute to the system breaking even. So again, a very different approach. We're now back with contracts, so some of those old things have come back. They're very much trying to get the finances back to where we would have been had the additional funding not come in for COVID. And that's going to reduce over a 3-year period. So we know that the overall resources for the system will reduce during that time, and so we have to plan for that. Another big exciting development in 22-23 has been us taking on the lead provider contract. Obviously that increases our income and our expenditure, take on lots of responsibilities that go alongside that, but also gives us lots of opportunities in terms of maximising what we can deliver through that expenditure, and doing the best we can for our population. We still see that continued commitment to invest in mental health services, so the mental health investment standard continues as the long-term plan continues. However, we are seeing a real shift now in terms of preparing for those reductions in income being available in the future. So certainly at an individual organisational level and a system level, we're looking to the next 2 or 3 years and saying, how do we reduce costs as well? How do we take costs out of the system? Because we know that that's going to be required. And as I've said, really accelerating with the schemes at Dorothy Patterson and Edward Street. So for those of you who've been to Dorothy Patterson recently, you'll see it's not quite out the ground yet, but the work has commenced, which is quite exciting. So it'll be really great to see that work actually start and to gain the benefits from that. that was my last slide, so I think I'm handing over to Cully.
You are, thank you, Georgina. I'll just go to my first slide then, please. Thank you. So much going on in the here and now, but I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we're continuously looking to the future, really, to ensure that we can continue as a trust and now as a lead provider to provide the best possible offer for the Boston people across the Black Country. We see collaboration as very much key to this, working hand in hand with people within the organisation, so within the trust, but also with our citizens, our communities and our partners. So moving forward for us, that continues to be a key priority in terms of how we build on that. We'll continue to build our partnerships at all levels in the system. So that's locally within each area or place across the Black Country, as well as our relationship or our partnerships that span over a greater footprint. So whether that's within our own system, looking at how we can work more closely with our acute partners in their provider collaboration, or with our primary care colleagues in the provider collaboration that we know is developing at scale, as well as the provider collaboration that we're involved in on a wider West Midlands region. So we recognise that all these different partnerships are really key as we look forward to improve outcomes for the people we serve, how we can collectively work with these partners to develop new offers, new models of health and care, and also ensure, as Georgina's just touched upon, we're making the best use of our collective resource. And also, as you know, a key priority for us is making sure that we're working with our partners to kind of go a step further in terms of shifting the dial on health inequalities and some of the existing social and economic factors which play a significant part in our overall health and well-being, and particularly recognising the significant impact that has across the Black Country populations. So just quickly onto the next slide, it's been mentioned a couple of times already. Obviously, the lead provider for mental health went live in July this year, which was fantastic, an accumulation of a lot of work by a lot of people over the last couple of years. So just a massive thank you from me to everybody who's been involved in that, both within the trust, but also within the wider ICB and previously the CCG. And this obviously built on our existing role as lead provider for learning disabilities. So in a nutshell, that the ICB has now commissioned the entirety of the mental health and LDA care pathway from us as the trust as the lead provider, rather than lots of different organisations working in silos. So as a result, as a trust looking forward, we now have new responsibilities when it comes to planning, to procurement, so in terms of buying services, transformation, and kind of making sure that as a system collectively we are performing and meeting the kind of needs of our citizens, some of whom obviously will be accessing our own trust services as well. So as we look forward, we recognise that with this change, we've been entrusted with significant responsibility and privilege, I would say, of being able to play a long-term custodian role for mental health and LDA. And as we move forward, we'll be ensuring that mental health and LDA continues to remain at the top of our wider system agenda, and obviously working alongside all partners, particularly primary care, our local authorities and the voluntary and community sector, to develop the vision and outcomes for mental health and LDA across the Black Country. Just very quickly on the next slide, in the kind of recognising a little bit of why we've done this, why this has been important, and some of what you'd expect to see in our kind of strategy as we move forward. There's a number of opportunities that we see the lead provider bringing across the Black Country. That includes ensuring that we can expand access to timely services to make sure the needs of everybody is kind of met consistently across the Black Country, but particularly in terms of underserved groups. It will support us to kind of build on the existing transformation that we've kind of started, that Chris had talked through earlier in his slides, but really kind of making sure that we can go as far as we possibly can in terms of getting the best possible outcomes from that piece, from the kind of various developments that are currently taking place. We see the opportunity as increasing opportunities for our own workforce, both within the organisation, but across the wider kind of health and care system when it comes to mental health and learning disabilities, greater opportunities for development and sharing learning, as well as kind of giving us the kind of platform to standardise where it makes sense to standardise and address some of what we know is the unwarranted variation for mental health and LDA across the Black Country system. But primarily, for us, it's about incentivising new relationships that encourage everybody to work together to focus on those bigger outcomes and values as we move forward. Very quickly on the next slide, This very much builds on what we've already seen as Progress being the lead provider for learning disabilities and autism. Chris touched upon this in his slide in terms of our performance as a system and the great strides that we've made over the last year or so with regards to improving outcomes for local people. And in terms of some of that experience as well, we know that locally in the Black Country, from the new ways of working that we've seen, supported by the lead provider, families are reporting that people are thriving outside of hospital and that they trust that the kind of new relationships that are there, that people will journey together with them over the tough times as well as the good. And even within our own trust, our colleagues are reporting the kind of enhanced support relationships and confidence they have by the new skills and the new relationships that the lead provider has enabled. So building on this as we move forward is really kind of key for us over the next year. The next couple of slides just very much kind of touch upon that. The first for the mental health kind of vision, which is currently under development. So as the lead provider, looking very much at a whole pathway approach, so across multiple providers, not just the mental health trust, but how we bring together the support to neighbourhoods and communities collectively together to make sure that those who need it most are the ones that we are able to support. Supporting people earlier to prevent crisis and in a needs-led way that gives people the right support at the right time, and working across multiple partners and agencies to recognise the wider determinants of mental health and offering support to the whole person. So we are very much in the process of developing our vision and strategy around these fundamental principles, and that's something we hope to kind of have developed over the course of the next few months. The next slide very much kind of describes a similar kind of values-based approach that we are taking in developing the children and young people's mental health strategy as lead provider across the Black Country. So based on the iThrive model, making sure again that we are looking at the whole pathway, not just people who need that kind of very specialist support, but in terms of supporting people very early on in that journey, whether that's even just through advice and support, all the way up to the kind of more specialist and intensive kind of elements of the pathway, and how collectively we make sure we bring the right skills and resource together across the Black Country to be able to respond to that. And just as my final slide, I just wanted to touch upon, obviously people will be aware we do specifically provide children and young people's family services in Dudley, and this year we've managed to make really good progress working with partners across our Dudley system in a range of events that have taken place to really accelerate the development of a new integrated model of care for the citizens of Dudley. And this is much broader than children and young people's, but we're very much the kind of linchpin on which we continue to develop the model and the vision for children and young people in Dudley over the next few months. We have now developed a kind of a graphic, which is kind of what you'll see there, and our kind of the key point that we are building on, which is represented here, is an ambition to blur the organisational lines between primary, community, secondary health and care. So again, that partnership and collaboration approach to kind of achieve the best outcomes for families, children and young people. That was very quick, but I'm going to hand you back over now to our Chief Exec, Marsha.
Oh, thanks, Cully. Crikey, what a lot of content we've kind of unapologetically covered, I guess. It's so great to reflect on what we've achieved through the year and what we've still got to do. Please be assured that we will be sharing slides and all the information that we've talked about today after the event, but I'm really pleased to say that now is our Q&A session. As long as you promise that the first question isn't, can you please summarise everything you've just talked about, that would be a huge help. You will notice that we're on Zoom, and right down at the bottom, certainly of mine, I don't know whether it's the same as yours, is a little icon called reactions, and if you click on there you can raise your hand through that function. So more than happy to take any questions or any comments from anyone. We've certainly had some activity in the chat, and that has been about sharing more information. Some comments there about our focus on people and about inequality, diversity and inclusion, etc. So thank you so much for everyone that's shared their comments there. Is there anyone that would like to ask any questions or raise any comments? I can't see any hands up at the moment. Have we stunned everyone into silence? I'm not sure I'd recognise a hand up actually on here. I'm pretty sure I would, because it appears on the participants bar, doesn't it, really, I think. Are there any comments that anybody would like to raise? Anything that we've said that hasn't quite made sense, hasn't quite gelled? We know we had some questions last year about our anti-racism work, which I know Ashi has talked about quite extensively already during our slides. We've been doing a huge amount of work on that during the year. I'm going to take it then. Ah, Mohammed, we have a hand up. Thank you for showing me the hand up function works, Mohammed. That's really, really helpful. Mohammed Yassin, would you like to introduce yourself and raise your comment, please?
Yes, hi, Mohammed Yassin. I'm a community development worker here at the Black Country Healthcare. I was really just testing my Zoom hand raise button, actually, and it does work.
Thank you for doing that, Mohammed. You've reassured me that it absolutely does work, and I know what we're looking for now, so that's good.
Yeah.
Is Jeremy
So
testing his as well? Or
yeah, no, so basically it's what I just wanted to say, Marsha, really was, I think it's not a question, but I think in terms of the presentations, what we've seen, and if you go back to last year, where we were a year ago, and how far we have moved within a 12-month period. And I think especially in terms of the challenges that we've faced over the last 12 months or so, or the last 2 years really, during COVID and other areas, I think we have really, made some really gains in terms of some of the progress and in the different areas. And I think that's only really down to the level of leadership that we have, and in terms of the commitment from our own staff and the people that we work with. And I think what we also, in terms of communities and development as well, what it has also shown, and we see that from our day-to-day roles working with local communities, local organizations, I think it has really put confidence back into people in actually engaging with the trust and really reaching out to us, and in trying to identify as to what the services are out there and how we can actually help and support them in their hour of need, and in terms of the support that they need. So I think the confidence in terms of our reach and reaching out to people has definitely grown, and we have gone a long way as compared to last year. I mean, there are still areas that we need to work on, but I think with the current strategy and the team that we have, I think we will only move forward here in terms of supporting our colleagues and also communities, our patients right across the Black Country.
Mohammed, thank you so much for raising that. I think very, very important points that you've raised. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I feel, and a lot of that learning is, of course, very much down to you and your colleagues and the area that you work in. I really feel like we're in a process, and I hope it absolutely is now underpinned by our values and the way we work, but where we are both learning from our communities, from people who are using our services, from people who are not, about what our communities want, as much as everyone else is learning from each other, really. So I think that's a really important point. Thank you so much for raising that. And you've infected the other hands, Mohammed, as well, as we've got some other hands up now, which is very good. So I'm going to just quickly go to the other hands. We've also got a message in the chat about alternative ways to raise questions if you don't feel very comfortable about popping your hand up. I'm going to call them in the order that I can see them. I can see Jeremy, and then Anne and Michelle.
Hi, Marsha. I just wanted to say that, listening to Dean and Chris about kind of building the organisation post-merger, and Ashley about supporting and focusing our people, and Georgina and Cully really about the future plans and the key role we've got as the lead provider. What I didn't hear so much today, and I know we've done some work on, is in redesigning some of our services. We've had a lot of involvement from staff and also patients and their carers. We talk about a term called co-production, which is about how to rethink and redesign things with the people who receive and engage in the service, the engagement, the communication, and also I know we've done some research this year, which obviously needs patients and others to participate in. Could anybody just give us any examples of that kind of co-production and engagement, rather than just we did, we do, we will sort of things? Because I think we're missing a bit of the richness that makes our organisation so different, really, that we work with people.
I would absolutely agree, Jeremy. It's been an absolutely huge focus of our work for this year, hasn't it? After the initial shock of not being able to meet with people face to face, to kind of, you know, developing new ways to reach out to partners, to service users, and to our staff as well. I wonder whether, I don't wish to put any colleagues on the spot, but I'm just about to. Michelle Carr, is that something that you would mind just giving us a quick overview of some of the things that we've done this year? And we can certainly bring other colleagues in on that, but I think you're probably the person who's got that really good overview of everything that we're doing in that vein.
Yeah, I think you've already said it. We've done a lot of work around engagement. There's been a lot of events that we've held on a lot of different areas, sort of linking into the priorities. So we've done a lot of workshops around autism, for example, that's continuing. And it's not just us working with ourselves, we're working with partners as well, across the system. So working across with other organisations. Become normal and we're accepting to live with it, we'll start to open that up to more face-to-face work as well. So Mohammed, who spoke earlier on, one of our community development workers, they've been doing a lot of work out in communities as well, really trying to engage people who are perhaps more seldom heard than others. And this is work that will always continue. It's continuing, and it's a big sort of focus for us in the team, you know, getting out, making sure that people are wanting to get involved and help us shape the way we're doing. And some examples, I talked about autism, but some of the work we've done around the dormitory wards. So we're currently doing work around Edward Street hospitals. We've held drop-in sessions for people to come and actually look at the plans. We're holding Q&A events. We've done some, you know, flyering locally as well. So there's lots of work going on, and like I say, well, it's something that we'll always continue to build on because we want people
Thanks
to be
so
involved.
much, Michelle. I will come back to your hand in just a sec. I just wanted to ask Dean, my colleague Dean, I know your team, Dean, have been working very hard on specifically on the service user and carer involvement strategy this year. Is there anything that you wanted to add specifically about that? I know you touched on it in your presentation.
Yeah, thanks very much, Marsha. I mean, and just to say that that's been a really significant exercise of not just co-production, because I think you're right, Jeremy, sometimes that word can mean a whole host of different things to different colleagues, but it's really been an exercise in service users and carers, really putting out there what they need from us as an organisation, and also how we can provide that as part of a broader system. So I think the game changer for me, Marsha, with the team has been also far more active delivery of that at a board level and at a system level. So as a lead provider, we can really ensure that we're leading the way, certainly with our acute colleagues that are looking to us to help them as well with how they get a better sense of how communities and service users and carers contribute to how their services are designed. But as I say, we have a lot of detail on this that also comes through our broader partnership forums, and I'd be very happy to provide more information if people are interested. Thanks.
Dean, that's super. Thank you so much. And thank you, Scott, as well, for posting in the chat there about the co-production work that we've done around the National Key Worker Pilot, which is really good and has absolutely demonstrated our position and our commitment to that, hasn't it? So I will carry on with hands. I've got Michelle and then Anne.
Yeah, this is just a question we've had through the chat. So the question is, what is being done to try and minimise waiting lists for adult mental health services besides the 18 to 25 pathway that's been set up? And they give an example of like 4.5 year waits are still a phenomenon. So anyone can answer that.
Thanks, Michelle. Again, we've done a huge amount of work on this. And what we are finding, particularly as a result of our recovery kind of post-COVID, is that often we're in a position where we are in able to see people who are referred to services and triage them, assess them quickly, relatively quickly. But what then can happen is that once people have been seen, they have to wait an unacceptable amount of time then to see perhaps to receive particular therapy or to see a particular clinician, which we have got a huge amount of work going on to try and resolve that. I'm going to go over to my colleagues Chris and Dr. Weaver to see if you wanted to come in and talk a little bit about some of that work that we've done this year. My colleague Mark is nodding. Do you want to come in, Mark?
Okay, I was thought I was meant to.
Go
Chris,
on,
that's fine. Yeah, no, just to answer Jeremy's question, really, some of the good co-productive work that we've done has been around our suicide prevention strategy. Some of the events we've held this year, there was an ICS event. I think Jeremy was at an event, and they always have a very strong presence of people with lived experience of suicide, of the issues around suicide and self-harm, either as a carer or a person who suffered difficulties. Some of our EBs have contributed extremely capably and consistently to that really important strategic suicide prevention work, both within the organisation and in the system, and also our mortality review work as well. I mean, only a few weeks ago, I was at the Friday brief with one of our EB colleagues who recited a wonderfully moving poem and highlighted some of our events around World Suicide Prevention Day and some of our events around hope. So I think that's a really fine example of some of the engaged and co-produced work in a very important part of our core business. Thanks.
Mark, thank you so much. Is there anything you wanted to add, Mark, about any of the waiting time issues that have been raised?
I mean, obviously, this is work that's ongoing, but I'm not sure in terms of giving examples as to how that's been kind of co-produced. But some of that, the feedback that we've had, has given us cause to, gather our thoughts about some of those issues, particularly, for example, in terms of outpatient waits, which is part of my portfolio, but other areas of the service as well. I think we have to accept that there are significant challenges in those areas which we're having to face into as one of our priorities.
Thanks, Mark. Can I just go over to Chris? Chris, just responding to the question we've had in through Michelle about waiting times.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me. There's a lot of interference. So yeah, we've had
absolutely
because of COVID, and a lot of organisations are struggling with waiting times. So we've done a complete review of our waiting list in all the divisions. We know exactly where we are in terms of waits, the first thing. And secondly, we've got recovery plans to address those waiting times, and these divisions are reporting on that, and that will come through our performance review group going forward. We do have a safety net, Marsha, as well, in terms of somebody's on a waiting list for a long time deteriorates, we have the safety net mechanisms to make sure they're seen quickly if that is required as well. The other thing it's impacting on is our secondary weights as well. So we address the primary weights, it impacts on our secondary weights. But again, we're doing a lot of work around waiting list initiatives to introduce and to try and get on top of those waiting times.
Chris, that's really helpful. Thank you for that. Michelle, if that's another question, I'll come back to you in just a sec. I'm going to go to Anne and then Bryony.
Thank you, Marsha. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Oh, fabulous. Thanks. Okay. Yeah, put my camera on too. Just to introduce myself, because some of you may not know who I am, I'm basically the older adult divisional lead psychologist. And really, rather than a question, it was just some reflections back about the presentations we've seen, really, and the work that's been showcased. I mean, I would like to pull out the impact that Lydia Jones, as Director of Therapies, her appointment to her post, I think has been really instrumental in integrating and embracing psychology and AHP as professions in their own rights into the leadership of many of the projects that you've showcased today. So I can speak from personal experience, really, of being involved in some of those redesigns that were showcased within the older adults. I'd echo Mohammed Yassin's comments, or is it Yasin Mohammed? I don't know, Yasin, I always get you confused. But I'd echo your comments about the fantastic teams that we have at all levels. So from a personal experience, I'm talking about leadership teams that I'm involved with, right the way to teams on the ground. So I'm fortunate enough in my role to be able to touch base with teams actually on the ground and deliver training to them, etc. And also obviously work with the older adult divisional leadership team. And I can honestly say, you've got some fantastic people in those teams who are really motivated. So I'm glad that came through in the presentations, that this is a team. We are a team, and it is a team effort. I'd say if you drill down further, there's even more fantastic work happening on the ground. And I'd say, for example, watch this space in relation to an older adult specific suicide prevention event that I'm helping to arrange, which will be on the 18th of November. We've had to delay the date because lots of other things have been happening. So that's just one example of the other work that's going on. And I would say also, if you drill down, there's a lot more being offered to our staff, at least in community, older adults and adult mental health, in relation to development of their clinical skills. So we're offering a tremendous amount of internal training, which is internally delivered within the trust. So we've got things like personal empowerment approach training being delivered. We've got CBT levels 1 and 2 internal training being delivered, dementia tier 2 awareness. So there's a lot of offers that we're making, and of course all of this enhances staff wellbeing, their connectedness to their teams. So there's a lot of work happening. Co-production, that was mentioned, wasn't it? I can speak from personal experience, being a member of the co-production network, and Matt Petchy, his team are doing fantastic work in relation to putting that strategy together. We're looking at, a ladder of co-production, which is going to be linked to Ulysses, and when people log events, whatever they're logging on Ulysses, then the ladder of co-production will sort of flash up and help people to understand, well, where do we sit with this QI project? How involved were our service users on this ladder of co-production? So that's great. Quality improvement. I've already put my comments in the chat about Eric and his team. I've got to mention Lindsay Phillips, because I work so closely with her in older adults, and we've got a fantastic divisional quality improvement plan. Again, psychology is really embedded in it. So I think it's better. I can see, even though we've had really challenging times, challenging years, and a lot of perspectives, I can see that we are doing better across the Black Country than we have for a very long time. And I could go on, but I'm not going to, because you're going to get sick of hearing me. But this, I can honestly, a big thumbs up from me.
And thank you so much. I wish we were for time, because I could really listen to you all after. I really enjoyed listening to your reflections.
I could talk about a lot of different, each of the strategies that we have that have been so eloquently highlighted today. I can honestly say that psychology is a part of it.
Absolutely.
And I think that's really, it's just commendable. We've got the people involved who want to be involved. We've got Lydia there at the helm. We've got Deb Cooper, across adult mental health and older adults, embracing the diversity of the professions, nursing, medical, psychology, AHP, OT, experts by experience. It's a really good place to be. It's a great team. So
thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. That's really. Can you spare us half an hour for next year's AGM, please? That would be very helpful. If we'll let you know the date. Thank you for talking about that.
No problem. Thanks so much for the time.
You
Thanks.
talked a lot as well about co-production, and just while I'm thinking about it, I wanted to put a huge thank you into our team of experts by experience. I know they work very closely with Matt and with the network and with yourself, etc.
They do.
Just wanted to say a huge thank you to that, and thank you.
No problem.
I'm going to go to Bryony now. Bryony, are you there?
Yeah, my question was mainly to Chris, I think, which was, with the safety nets that have been put in place for people who have been on wait list for AMS for a very long time, how are they informed of these safety nets when a lot of the problem is that they're not receiving contact for long periods of time from the service?
You mean how they're informed in terms of how it's communicated to them?
Yeah, how are they informed that there is that safety net and
I expect the operational teams to inform the clients of that safety net. If that hasn't happened, Bryony, then I'll speak to you outside of this meeting to find out why that's not happening.
Thank you. I also had another question. Sorry, I've written it down for myself so that I remember it, which was, with the creation of this new service, there is a couple of issues that have been encountered where some of our borders have changed, this is a question mainly for everyone now, where a lot of people are now stuck in a position where they are between the border of the Black Country services and South Staffs or other services. Is what is being done to provide for those people when South Staffs or wherever they're stuck on the border between are saying that it's our responsibility and we think it's theirs?
That's a really timely question, Bryony, as in is your question about the waiting list. Actually, just to come back to that a second ago, we heard a patient story at board. Forgive me, Bryony, I think you might have been there actually a few months ago, about a lady who'd been waiting for contact with our adult mental health services, who had raised the very same question you're raising about support during that wait. And we certainly went and had a look into what was being offered to check assurances about that. But as Chris said, if you've got any particular information about that, please do let us know. The issue about the South Staff's changes, I know this is a very hot topic at the moment. I'm looking towards my exec colleagues for someone to pick that up, as I don't know the details of it. Is there any of my colleagues that can pick that up? I've got a hand from Dr. Abalash. Is that to respond to this, Sharada?
Yeah, probably, because I'm leading this work with Mark Weaver and Chris.
Fabulous.
I know some of the details. Yes, there are some boundary changes because of the lead provider and other Bryony. So what we have done is we have met the organizational leads from the mid-staff organization, and we are looking at safe transfer of patient care, and we have made sure that it's a patient-centered transfer rather than a bulk transfer, so that the individual care is not compromised. So we have a proper plan in place, and we are working together with other organization, and communication will be sent to the GPs and all the patients and their families once these transfers happen.
Dr. Abalash, thank you so much for that. Very much in train, Bryony. If there are any particular examples of where those kind of principles that Dr. Abalash talked about, you feel they're not being adhered to, would you mind letting us know? Because that'd be really helpful feeding of information, Bryony. Thank you.
Definitely.
Marsha, could I just add to that? I think it's fair to say that we often have these changes because the services are sort of commissioned on the basis of the GP, and the GPs can choose which whether they want to sit under Samwell or Staffordshire or Dudley to a certain extent, and so we see these boundary changes quite often. So I think there's another one going in a different way from Samwell to Birmingham or vice versa. So it's I suppose what Dr. Abalash has set out is quite a known process that we have to go through. I think that particular one in Staffordshire is probably bigger, but it's something that happens quite a lot. And we also will always have that sort of boundary, so where somebody might live in the Black Country but their GP's in Birmingham or vice versa. And so we do have contracts as an organisation with all of those surrounding organisations as well, so that to make sure that people can get care in the right place for them. So I just wanted to add that, because it happens quite a lot actually, and most of the time it just happens, I suppose, in the background, but it is always clinically led, as Dr. Abalash has said.
Thank you, Georgina. Yes, it's very much part of our arrangements, isn't it? We just need to make sure that whatever's happening, that the people being referred to our services are getting that continuity and no disruption to their care in between, don't we? Now, I know we're slightly over the time that we allotted. Are you okay for me to take the couple of remaining hands that we have, and then I'll hand back to our chairman. The next hand I have is from Ian Evans. Ian, good to see you. Are you in transit? You look like you're in transit somewhere.
No, I'm sitting in
You're
the van.
stationary. Oh, that's all right then. That's okay. Sorry, Ian, over to you.
Yeah, can you tell me why there's a massive lack of communication and information from the trust to patients regarding people like myself suffering with mental health issues, and then suffering more, not knowing what's going on? And when you manage to find someone to talk to, I haven't got a clue what's going on either, regarding prescribing medication, regarding anything, and you just keep getting passed from one person to another person, and it goes round and round in a circle, and it just makes the actual suffering with ADHD or autism or anything a hell of a lot worse because of it. And it just makes the anxiety, the depression even worse, not knowing what's going on, when it's going to happen. And it's just a blank. You just feel like you're just left completely on your own all the time. And you just want someone to talk to.
Ian, thank you so much for raising that. I think you can, it's from what you've heard today, I would hope you feel assured that that is the absolute opposite of what we're trying to achieve in terms of being supportive and responsive. And I'm really, really sorry if that's been your direct experience of our services. That absolutely isn't what we've intended at all. I know that there are some specific questions about your own pathway of caring, but I'm not sure this is necessarily the right place to be answering those. But what I am going to do is ask my colleague Chris just to talk a little bit in general about how we're trying to improve that communication, if that's okay. Chris, over to you.
Yeah, and I think the service that is particularly relating to is our AA service, and we're doing a lot of work in that service in terms of redoing the service model and how we're going to deliver that going forward. And we will be in touch and communicate with all our patients about when their medication is going to be due, when they're going to be contacted going forward. Marsha, it's gone through a lot of change, that service. I'm really honest with everybody. And we put an interim model of care delivery for now. Then there's a longer term plan for it going forward, so we can address the waiting times and the waiting list in that particular service. But Ian, we'll be in touch with you specifically around your issue, but outside of this meeting.
Chris, thank you. Sorry, I couldn't get myself off mute there. Ian, thank you so much for raising that. Would it be okay for someone to contact you directly about your particular issues? Is that okay?
Well, yeah, anyone really. It's just the lack of communication and just not knowing what's happening and just that sort of stuff.
Absolutely understood. Ian, thank you so much for raising that. I noticed, Nick, I know you're next, but I noticed Dr. Weaver's popped his hand up. Was it in response to that, Mark?
It was, Marsha, thank you. Yeah. And just to echo Chris's comments, I'm obviously very sorry to hear about your experience, Ian, and sorry that we haven't done all we could to help you. What I would say, if this is specifically about that service, it has been a service that we've had to review, and therefore one of the reasons that for the delay in communication is because it's only been during that review that we've got to the stage of being able to identify the level of waiting. These kind of services do attract a waiting list, and we're getting to grips with communicating with people who've been forced to wait. But the other thing I would add is that that is a specific service for ADHD and particular disorders. If ever your personal mental health distress and challenges goes beyond that, then you are perfectly entitled to access and to use what you'd call the mainstream core services for mental health, both crisis and routine, which in some cases don't have those kind of waiting lists. If it's a very specific thing that you're looking for, then I'd apologise that that hasn't been available to you through that service. But there's no reason why a person should remain in ongoing distress because they're waiting for something to happen, when we do also have mainstream services to deal with things like depression and anxiety and day-to-day mental fluctuations which can happen. So I hope that we can pick this thing up specifically for you and address your concerns as soon as possible.
Mark, thank you so much for that. We really need to have done better, Ian, and I'm really sorry for that, but I'm hoping that information that Mark's furnished us with might help in the shorter term at least, and we'll definitely be in touch. Is it okay if I move on to our next question, which is from Nick?
Hello.
Hiya, Nick, we can hear you.
Smashing. It's just a quick question about the sort of future of our staff group, our clinical staff group. So I come from Walsall Hospitals Trust. It's an acute trust, and they've got lots of clinical nurse specialists, advanced nurse specialists, sort of band 7, band 8 nurses. And a lot of the roles from the medics and the nurses are overlapping, and it seems like quite a modern sort of way of looking at things. A lot of outpatients are covered by nurses and whatnot. Now, I currently work in Walsall with the older adult community team, and I'm a band 7. We have a few band 7s there, and large elements of the team are quite nurse-led, and we find it's quite a really safe service, no waiting times, fully integrated to place-based teams. It's a really efficient service, and it's something we want to hold on to. Now, looking around the trust, I haven't really met many sort of band 7, band 8 clinical nurses within this trust. It seems that when you get to band 7, you sort of have to be a clinical lead or a manager. Obviously, I can talk all day about the pros of having senior sort of clinical nurses providing that level of clinical care, and I'm happy to invite anyone to come and spend some time with our team to see how we do work as well. But it's just for the trust, are we looking in the future at sort of embracing this sort of role? And if so, we're working with universities or anything to look at the courses, because a lot of university courses are all sort of based on if you're an RGN, a physical nurse wanting to specialise in anything. And there isn't too much from what I can see about if you want to become a mental health clinical nurse specialist. So that's the sort of questions I wanted to ask the forum, ultimately.
Nick, thank you so much. That's a cracking question. We touched on some of this, didn't we, when we caught up recently? I'm going to hand over to my colleague Dean, if that's okay, because I know Dean's not only our CNO, but has also got some very close connections with our local university. So, Dean, are you able to comment on that one?
Yeah, of course. Brilliant question, Nick. And you could see me smiling because you couldn't be more correct on where our developments lie. I think it's true to say we have lagged behind some of our other kind of mental health and learning disability colleagues in other trusts. I'm used to a far more integrated kind of approach to specialist practice across all professions. So I think I hinted on, it was more than a hint in my slides, around our investment in that career structure for professional nursing. And that includes post kind of band 7 specialist roles, which, let's be frank about it, we haven't traditionally invested in previously. From the point of view of the university, there's a huge amount of formal specialist practice training that's at a master's degree level, certainly within mental health and learning disability. So, Nick, if you want me to run through that with you individually, more than happy to do that. But I think what you'll find is that from the first week in October, when Becky and I've locked in the refreshed professional nursing structure alongside the work that Lydia and Mark have already been completing, you'll see that there'll be a real clear route to advanced practice, which doesn't stop anybody having the opportunity to move in a kind of a leadership or managerial position. Those opportunities are always there, because my career, like a lot of people's, it's not a linear process. You can absolutely move into differential roles, but we have to invest in more advanced practice roles for nursing. I'm totally clear about that. And we also have to invest in non-traditional professional roles as well. And I think Ashley was outlining the great plans we've got on our workforce redevelopment, which is based on the work that Mark led on our clinical strategy. It really is our clinical strategy that's calling out for us to have very, very clear advanced practice roles. In my previous organizations I've worked in, we've had 20, 30 nurse consultant led roles. So, we should be moving in that direction quite quickly. Great question. Very happy to catch up personally. Thanks.
Super.
Thank you.
Many thanks, Dean, and thank you, Nick, for raising that. Well, listen, after an initial absence of hands, a massive thank you to everybody who's contributed to a really, really good Q&A session. There's some more activity going on in the chat, so please keep that going. But at this stage, I'm very happy to hand back over to Jeremy. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Marcia, and everybody, the 5 other staff who've given the presentations, which I think have given us such a kind of packed level of information. I feel like I've done an A-level in these care services in just over an hour. But I think what that's done, and okay, 5 or 6 people have presented those slides, but it's a cast of thousands, literally, who have provided the material on those slides and shown all of those levels of activity, as well as running all of our normal business services across the Black Country under the extreme sort of enduring difficulties of the pandemic. But what that seems to have brought on is a tremendously rich level of questions, even despite the sort of artificial virtual environment. We have to search around the screen for how to put a hand up and everything else. And what I reflect on is that last year, I think when we were at this stage, our questions were really about our future plans, because we were still planning to do a lot, although we've already done quite a bit in the year since then. And there was quite a lot of questions about inclusion and how we treated people. And this year, we seem to have had questions very much about the quality, the absolute bread and butter quality of services and how they develop further, how they're organised, how they're delivered, how some of them have been delayed, and how we manage to sort of mitigate and communicate with people in those very, very difficult situations where everybody has assessed that you do have a need that we can supply, but for all sorts of manifold reasons, it is very difficult for several parts of the NHS at the moment to move at the pace that the demand is coming through. So a very, very different set of questions for our sort of slowly maturing organisation. And we thank everybody who's joined us this afternoon for this rich conversation. It has been recorded. It won't just waft away and be forgotten. I hope other people who weren't able to join us today can therefore sample and experience the discussion that we've gone through. So just finally, can I thank every single one of you who's joined us today, and it's been a memorable afternoon, well spent, and hopefully we can all gather again this time next year and see even more progress from the organisation, not just on the big future plans and the redesigning of services we're doing, but also some of the people who've spoken today about career aspirations that haven't been possible before, can get their foot on the next ladder for their career, and some people today who've had delays in accessing services or blockages or confusion as we've had to change services next year can explain that services are more accessible and quicker to receive, and the organisation can move on further. I do think that everything we've seen and heard today is quite indicative of the whole national picture. I think as a nation we're impatient, we want to do more. We want better quality public services. We want to see the economy support us more rather than us be, battered by the economy. So I don't think our organisation's sentiments, morale, feelings and perspective is any different to the outside world. But let's try harder this year to get forward as a nation and a public service, and the 1.2 million people we serve here, especially the 59,000 who've had an enduring mental health or learning disability or autism feature in their lives, feel that our service is in its new role, is their friend, is their advocate, is their provider in the terms that they wish, not the way that we wish. And our future, hopefully, is active, improving. And thank you, everybody who's contributing to that here today. So thank you very much. Thank you, everybody who's contributed. Bless the IT for standing up and performing when we needed it the most. And we hope to see you next year. Thank you.